A cold man who consistently carries out his plan of killing those closest to him. Hi, welcome. Of course, we have to finish this kind of series, let's call it that. Well, I would say that the summary of all this is that Duda is dead. But of course, the matter is not over yet. I think we all got a solid beating in some way. We definitely did, and as a result, in yesterday's episode, I even mixed up the names, for which we apologize, of course, but it was just a slip of the tongue. Heat, exhaustion, the fact that we had to prepare these episodes quickly, it all took its toll. Also, watching everything that happened there in Limanova, or actually in Starovish and the surrounding area, we all know the outcome. You also remember the day before yesterday I talked about just holding on, that there's pressure, that there were quite a few critical words directed at the police. To put it mildly, of course, because it was something more, but I was convinced, really convinced, that this had to be resolved. There was no other way, since we took it for granted that he came at 10 o'clock, that he shot at the police officers, then he simply had to be nearby. It was just a matter of sealing things off, making a solid cordon, keeping him inside and gradually tightening the ring or the cordon so it would close in. And so for the police officers to move in so that the officers would finally meet up. And yes, that's really how it was. It all had to take time because the search area was huge. We remember 200 hectares. And I would say this, I know a man died, there's been a death, but I would say that for all of us, it's a kind of, to put it bluntly, relief that in some way this matter has been resolved. Some of us probably also feel a bit unsatisfied, thinking the police should have caught him, but he just wasn't that type of person. We'll probably come back to this during our discussion, I think so. We know a lot, almost everything, but as you know, almost makes a big difference. I'll tell you what surprised me in all of this. What surprised me was his consistency in what he did. Today we know he probably woke up with that thought. He got up with the thought that he would kill that day. He probably planned it all the night before. I don't think he expected his wife to leave for work earlier because it seemed like she worked at a school and that day there was some event, so she left earlier. He didn't know about it and just didn't anticipate it. He probably would have started the shooting with his wife. But he takes that rifle or carbine, leaves the house with it, and at that point he realizes his wife isn't there. He goes to the house next door where his in-laws live. On the way, he runs into his father-in-law and gets into some kind of argument or discussion with him. But he doesn't shoot his father-in-law. He's still acting logically. He goes to his mother-in-law's house, to Mrs. Elżbieta, and shoots there. Thinking he killed her, he simply leaves and heads to his daughter's house. Actually, that house isn't finished yet because it's still under construction. He has to walk several hundred meters. He's walking, and through all of this, he's still logical. When he approaches the construction site, his son-in-law is standing on the first floor. He takes aim to shoot. This was a kind of hunt for people. He took aim probably just like he did when he was poaching in the forest. At first, he missed. Zbyszek realized something was wrong and tried to run away. And for a while, he actually managed to escape. He was running, but the second shot was more precise. It was a shot to the head. He had a scope and experience with shooting, and he hit him in the head. According to the witnesses, Zbyszek was hit when he was running past the children's trampoline. He probably knew that. He killed Zbyszek, then went to shoot at his daughter Justina. First, he must have spotted her somewhere in the apartment because he shot through the window. Then he went to the other side of the house, broke the window with the butt of his gun, and started shooting again. It looks like Justina tried to save herself. She took her little daughter in her arms and ran out of the house. If she had stayed, she might have survived. Running out made her an easier target, and he hit her. The whole thing was also witnessed by his other son, who ran to help. Justina managed to reach him. It looks like she handed the child to him. Then she collapsed, and it turned out that he had killed her too. And then after all that, he got into his car and drove away. I think he was gone for about 3 hours. Did he go somewhere near the school and wait for his wife there? That seems the most likely to me, but he couldn't wait any longer because she was busy with other things, so he probably gave up. Only then did he realize there were police everywhere, that they were about to catch him, so he left the car and ran to the forest. Well, like I said, I'm amazed by his determination. We've said it many times, that's just the nature of our channel, that people act in some kind of frenzy. They do things that are, I would say, just as brutal, but they're in some kind of trance, something they can't control. He did everything coldly, and I would say that from a characterological point of view, this person is exceptional, just a cold person who consistently carries out his plan of killing his loved ones. Even if we compare him to Yavorek, because we keep comparing this case to Yavorek's case, it seems that both of them have similar traits. But Yavorek acted in some kind of frenzy. He started shooting at everything, and then only after that did he run away. There wasn't that kind of pause in all of it to catch his breath and even hold himself back. Well, with him, it was there all the time, because after all, everything was stretched out over time. Duda is running away, as you know, and I thought there might be a problem here, because from the moment the alarm was announced, the police officers had to come to the scene. People had to be brought in from home, put into cars, brought to the area near Limanova, and everything had to be organized. It took time, so I thought, well, he could have escaped during that time, hidden somewhere or left, maybe even crossed the border, the closest being Slovakia. But he could have just left Limanova altogether and hidden somewhere. I would say in some way that this man felt safest in the area. He didn't leave the area. Maybe he even came back then. Remember, at 10 o'clock he came back to the house. I still think he didn't come back because he was hungry, although it's possible he was looking for food. I think he was still looking for revenge. Basically, his wife was the last one on his list. The list in his head, because remember, there were also rumors somewhere that he made a list of 10 names on that list. He would cross off another one, but no, that's nonsense. It was just some story that came up at some point. But he did have that list in his head, and I think his wife was still on that list. That's why, in his stubbornness, he came to the house. And here there was a meeting, a confrontation with the police officers. I also said that I think organizing this ambush and arrest should have been done differently. Something else happened too, as we know, but it might have been the only opportunity and chance to catch him then. On the other hand, it was a sign that he was in the area, and I said at the time that's actually really good news, because it's a chance to catch him. And the net was slowly closing in. As you know, I got a bit worried because, again, well, basically the police said 2 days ago that they're launching a special hotline for this case. Then they announce a reward, 50,000 zlotys for anyone who somehow helps in his capture. So I think a hotline, a reward, well, that shows they probably don't know where he is. It could be bad, it could be tough, like looking for a needle in a haystack. And realistically, are there other theories in play saying that he just ran away? Well, I also understand the hotline could have served a completely different purpose, because during that time, several people were detained who were suspected of helping him. Nothing came of it. These people were released and sent home, but the question is whether there really was nothing here, or if nothing was found, no evidence. Well, those are two different things, but as you can see for yourselves, and it also appeared in police statements, that supposedly someone was helping him all along. Whether it was from the beginning or later, we don't know. However, the police suggest that someone else was behind this and was helping him all along. So that's also something that needs to be clarified. The investigation will definitely continue. It also seems to me, from a logical point of view, that he was showing up, but he wasn't just wandering around that forest without a purpose. He showed up, but he was hiding somewhere. Well, during the day, he was hiding. He would go into some kind of room somewhere. Was it a room that someone arranged for him, or was it his own place, like a poacher's hideout where he kept some supplies? Both are possible, both are possible. I still think, I'm convinced that he had some kind of place, that it's not impossible he kept supplies there, and maybe extra weapons, ammunition, and drinking water. It seems to me that it's possible, just as it's possible that there really are people who, even in this situation, were helping him.
So I definitely know that, because that's one of the threads of this investigation.
It hasn't been concluded, and it's still possible.
So I think that he basically tried to make his way through somewhere at night.
As the encirclement was closing in, he realized he didn't stand a chance. But then during the day, he would go back to some room, wait again, and go out at night. He would be noticed during the day, so there was no way around it. There was a helicopter there, and Black Hawks, at least two, and a helicopter with a camera. As you know, later the military got involved as well, and they deployed drones, including those flying eyes. If he had been walking in the forest, I suppose, of course it's difficult, but I think that somehow, with the help of that equipment, they would have found him. So I think he only moved at night, and during the day he just hid. That was his tactic. Coming back to why I think the police suspect that someone was helping. Well, first of all, of course, there's the reward, although the reward could also be a result of the fact that a famous detective offered it. I also think that offering 50,000 zlotys in this situation when we're chasing such a dangerous man seems to me more like a symbolic amount. Well, if someone were actually tempted, risking all kinds of dangers, I think that something like 300,000, maybe 500,000 would actually move someone. 50,000, well, probably not. It was symbolic. But we also know that the police usually don't offer larger amounts simply because they don't have that kind of money. But I think that in this situation, even that money could probably be found. That's one thing. And the second thing is that the police also warned any potential accomplices against helping because, of course, that's how it is. The person who hides the perpetrator or helps him escape or hide faces up to 5 years in prison. And such an announcement, I would say kind of out of nowhere, appeared on the police website. The police talked about it, so it also seemed that they had suspicions, maybe they knew, maybe they guessed, and wanted to scare those who might be helping. And now I think that later the logic of the facts suggests that yes, he was found around 9 p.m. He was found, and technically it looks like a police car was driving down this county road, which is near here, in the area of Stara Vish. A civilian car followed with a man and woman driving nearly alongside. Both the police officers and the couple noticed someone lying by the road. Of course, the police officers went to check and everyone had his description, so right away they realized that it was Duda and that he was already dead. It also looks like, well, the body was lying not far from the road, so if someone was driving by, they just had to notice it. They had to see it, and it looks like the body wasn't there before. It wasn't there before because if it had been there earlier, if he had shot himself, well, we assume he shot himself. They were there earlier. So those patrols really did go there. They patrolled. They were constantly crossing that road. So someone would have had to notice him. And that's a possibility. The result of him simply walking out. It's not out of the question that this road might be significant. In this case, I would say symbolic, that he didn't end up by this road by accident. On the basis that, well, he was hoping that somehow he would make it through. I don't know. We can assume, speculate that maybe someone was supposed to pick him up from there, but for various reasons they didn't. Either they didn't want to or couldn't. He waited for someone or some transport to pick him up. And I would also say an even more sensational version, that someone simply brought him there and left him, and that's why he's not far from the road. And the body was simply visible. There was a weapon lying next to it. Well, everything indicated that he simply shot himself. I think we'll have an answer to that question. The autopsy was already done today, but that's routine. In such cases, the autopsy results are not released immediately, although the doctor who performed the autopsy already knows. A report is prepared from this. But also for this report, I mean the autopsy report, ballistic tests need to be done. So basically all these wounds correspond to the position of the weapon. Could the weapon have fallen in that way? Well, these are complicated things. I don't know much about this, because we always only receive ballistic reports from the experts. And based on that, further actions were taken. But I think the answer will be here. Did he shoot himself, or maybe someone scared just got rid of him and left him there? I'm talking about a sensational theory, but many cases have already surprised us in such ways. Well, it's hard to get away from that. As for the logic of the facts, well, it seems to me that Duda simply had enough. That maybe he would be not far from that path, because that was his last hope. When he realized that there would be no hope, and he heard the approaching police officers, so he ended his own life. And whatever we might say about this case, because I said, well, here we have to trust the police officers. No matter how we look at this case, we have to be fair and admit that Duda wouldn't have shot himself if it weren't for that tight situation. If it weren't for the fact that the police officers made such a ring that he couldn't escape from, and the fact that he shot himself. I talked about that. Someone watched me. Of course, I talked about it here on our channel. I also spoke often in different media. Yesterday, around 10 or 15 past 12, I was still talking live on television at night. So I said that there are two most likely solutions. The first is that Duda will simply end it himself at some point. And the second solution is that he'll get into a shootout with the police. Basically, that he'll just die. I wrote out that third option, that he'll surrender, that he'll come out with a white flag, that he'll let himself be handcuffed. No. His personality, his character, that's what we see during those proceedings that took place. He was a man who always had to be right. Others were supposed to submit to him. He was always the winner, the victor, and everyone else who had a different opinion became his enemy. I think that for him it would have been a dishonor, at least that's how he saw it, that the police put him in handcuffs, that they led him out of that forest. Then, of course, the whole process begins. People see him, he has to look them in the face. His acquaintances, the villagers, his family. For him, that would be a total failure. A reputational one. He chose the solution that was better for him, so he simply shot himself in the head, no matter how we look at it. We can say that too. In a way, he left on his own terms. Today, I've been talking about this case all day again. Honestly, I'm sick of it. Many journalists and writers and journalists from radio or television asked me how I assess this matter, because many people say this, even theoretically among experts. It was possible, faster. Why so many police officers, as it turns out? Yesterday, the provincial commander said that there were 840 of them. Additionally, there were others, so likely over 1,000 officer types. But we also know that there were people who simply know the forest better than the police who came from outside this town. There had to be guides, so there were many other people who helped. How can they not catch one man? But I also talked about the fact that it's all about time. It's not important. What's important is to do it precisely. And the police had one basic task: to solve this case. To solve the case, no matter what that explanation would be. And it worked. And we have to give credit here that the police did it, that there was a wave of hate pouring out, that he wasn't detained. Well, that's what really happened. But I'm saying, with all of this. Now, let's imagine a situation where Duda disappears, that nobody knows where he is. Well, first of all, I can't imagine the situation of those people who are left there, that whole village knowing he could show up at any moment. I've already talked about that. And above all, for the police, at some point, it also became a symbolic matter. If they didn't succeed, I think the hate would have been total. But there's one more thing that would also undermine trust in the police, because each of us would think, how is that possible? Such forces, such resources, all the best they have, and they couldn't find this man if he had escaped like that. Well, I just prefer not to think about it. So I say with all this, I know there are critical people very much. And after what I say, many people won't agree, and that's okay, because we accept that. We read. Sometimes we don't agree either, but that's my opinion. And the most important thing is that this matter has simply been explained. And I think that, yes, if there had ever been such an operation in the history of Polish criminology, there wasn't after the war. First of all, of course, because of the cruelty of it all. Secondly, because of the area, the terrain, extremely difficult. I mentioned this example, those partisans, hundreds of partisans who hid during the war and no one found them. Well, someone might say there wasn't such equipment. Each of those, every piece of equipment that was used, it has limited capabilities in some way. It's not global positioning system that shows where that Duda is hiding. Even what I mentioned about those dogs, even tracking dogs can be helpless when there's a poacher who knows how to cover his tracks, the human scent, and he knew how to do that. So secondly, the area. Secondly, the number of police officers and equipment that was used, unique. I mentioned those drones being used in the military or during wartime. And because of this man's personality, contrary to appearances, he didn't seem like some primitive person, but rather a man of the forest. There were some comparisons to Rambo, but Rambo was actually a very likable person. He had people rooting for him. This one didn't. But let's say he had some of those skills too. He knew how to survive in the forest. To manage, he was a loner. He had weapons. You could probably look for those comparisons. There were even memes like that. I saw that in Limanowa in the old days. And there was a sign saying Limanowa and Rambo hiding somewhere under that sign. Of course, I know there will be some critical words. And I think to finish up, so we don't drag this out any longer, because people are probably already tired of this case. The investigation will continue. In my opinion, the most important issues are whether someone helped him or not. The second issue is trying to find some kind of hideout, stash, or some place he was hiding, because I think such a place might exist. And I think the third thing is something that taught us that if we know there's a man in the village who poaches, who has a weapon, who shoots in the forest, we need to react sooner before such a crazy person uses that weapon in a situation where he already has several cases of abusing his family. Well, maybe that will get through to people's imagination. Like I said, there was a lot of hate directed at the police. But the hate wasn't just towards the police, it was also towards hunters. One of them even called me and said they got it too. That's just how it is. But I think we also need to clearly distinguish between those who poach, who kill ruthlessly, and hunters who are just out there in the forest. And I think that's all for today. Will we come back to this case? I don't rule it out. It hasn't really ended yet. We'll be watching. And for today, of course, take care.